I stood before the gilded double doors of the Grand Meridian's largest conference hall in San Francisco, my laptop heavy in my hands. Every sound around me seemed to fade when the security guard glanced at my badge and shook his head. His voice was calm, polite, and firm. "Sorry, Ms. Levinson, you're not on the guest list." For a second, I thought I'd misheard him. Every year, I was here at Lumitech's Technology Honors Gala, an internal event, but grand enough to rival a national award ceremony. Crystal chandeliers glimmered overhead, laughter and the soft clinking of champagne glasses spilled from the slightly open doors. I leaned forward and caught a glimpse of my former colleagues inside, dressed to perfection, the silver name badges on their suits catching the light. I steadied my voice. "I've worked here for 3 years. There must be some mistake." The guard frowned and checked the list again. "Only those on the list can enter. I'm just following orders." A familiar voice came from behind him. "What's going on here?" Victor Hale appeared in a tailored black suit, deep blue tie matching the company logo. His smile was easy, the kind people wear when they've just closed a $1 million deal. "Maya," he said, nodding at me before turning to the guard. "It's fine. I'll take it from here." I waited for an explanation, a reason, maybe even a forced apology. Instead, Victor crossed his arms and looked at me with the kind of pity that stings more than anger. "We already have too many people tonight," he said. "This event is reserved for our official representatives." I frowned. "I designed the core framework of eLens. I spent over 6 months on it." Victor smiled, almost kindly. "And the company's grateful for that. But tonight's about public image, you understand? We need to project something new, younger, more in tune with our investors." I looked past him toward the stage. The backdrop glowed with bold white text. "Innovation of the Year, eLens Framework, presented by Eleanor Park." Standing nearby was a familiar silhouette, Eleanor, the new intern from Yale, the investor's niece. Her hair neatly pinned, eyes bright with confidence, the pale blue gown hugging her elegant frame. I remembered the first time I met her 3 months ago. She'd been polite, curious, eager to learn. I hadn't seen it coming. I'd shared demo slides, early prototypes, a few ideas about refining nonverbal language analysis. I thought I was helping a young woman passionate about technology. I didn't know that everything I'd shared would soon appear under her name and be the reason I was standing outside this door tonight. Victor sighed. "Don't make a scene, Maya. We're already considering future opportunities for you. This is just a PR event. It doesn't affect your position." I met his eyes. For a moment, I thought I saw something, maybe regret, or maybe just irritation that I wasn't playing along. I exhaled slowly, then opened my laptop. Victor tilted his head. "What are you doing?" I didn't answer, just typed a few lines, attached 4 files, selected the recipient list, and hit send. I checked the time, 7:04 p.m. Then I closed the laptop and looked up at him. "Check your email." I turned and walked away. I heard him call after me, but I didn't stop. I moved down the long corridor, through the grand lobby where servers were lining up trays of hors d'oeuvres, through the glass doors, and into the crisp San Francisco night. By the time I crossed the street toward the parking lot, my phone started buzzing, once, twice, then nonstop. I didn't need to look at the screen to know who it was. Everything I'd built, everything I'd prepared, was now in motion with a single click. 3 years of silence. 3 years of being the invisible backbone. 3 years watching others take credit for my work. Tonight, I didn't get into that room. That's fine. I don't need a seat at their table. I'll build my own. Have you ever been in a moment like that? When you gave everything, stayed loyal, and still ended up erased like you never existed? If you're still listening, thank you. Maybe you know that feeling, the quiet ache of watching someone else stand on a stage, soaking in the applause for something you created in silence. I'd love to know where you're listening from. On your way home, over your morning coffee, or in the middle of a sleepless night, holding back stories of your own. Leave a comment. And if you believe in quiet revenge, the kind that doesn't scream, just clicks at the right moment, hit subscribe. Because what happens next will prove one thing. Sometimes, silence is the strongest strike of all. My name is Maya Levinson. I was 31 that year, and people called me a great engineer who didn't know how to play politics. To them, that was a flaw. To me, it was a backhanded compliment. I wasn't born to go in circles. I was born to solve problems. I grew up in the northern suburbs of Seattle. Our house was small, tidy, filled with books and the warm light of desk lamps. My father had been a software engineer at a major tech company until the day he was fired for reporting that his manager had stolen his idea. After that, he opened a tiny computer repair shop in our garage, and my mother, a math teacher, became the family's main source of income. Both of them taught me that logic and integrity were the greatest assets I could ever own. I believed that. Believed it so deeply it bordered on naivete. I graduated from MIT with dual degrees in computer science and behavioral psychology. My thesis focused on how AI could analyze facial expressions and micro-gestures to predict human behavior. Those ideas led me to Lumatech, a young but ambitious startup trying to merge artificial intelligence with behavioral science to optimize e-commerce experiences. When I joined, Lumatech had fewer than 50 employees and occupied the second floor of an old brick building in the Mission District. No lounge, no private elevator, but something far more valuable. The air was thick with invention and fire. In those early months, I felt I belonged. I worked through the night, ate cold burritos, and listened to debates about product design that stretched until 2 in the morning. Then Victor Hale arrived. He was hired as product director just as the company was trying to evolve from a pack of gifted engineers into a business with a story investors could buy into. Victor had everything I didn't: a camera-ready smile, the ability to pitch without slides, and a contact list full of people who wrote six-figure checks. He'd already been through 3 startups, 2 of which had been acquired at enviable valuations. Every time he walked into a room, people turned. I'd never met anyone like him. At first, I was impressed. He stopped by my desk one June afternoon after reading an internal memo I'd written on body language analytics. "Maya," he said, "do you realize you're sitting on a gold mine? You need someone who can turn this into something investors understand in 2 minutes. I can do that." So we started working together. I handled the technical side, data analysis, code, system architecture. Victor turned dry logic into a story that sparkled. "Imagine walking into an online store," he said, "and with just a tilt of your head, the system knows you're unsure. eLens will give you the right product, at the right moment, in the right way." I thought it was a rare harmony between engineering and strategy. I was wrong. The first warning came during a fall investor meeting. I wasn't invited, but someone in the room later told me Victor had presented his new idea, integrating AI with behavioral analytics. My research: 6 months of work, not a single mention of my name, not even a credit line on a slide. I confronted him in the break room. "You didn't mention me," I said, keeping my voice even. Victor smiled and patted my shoulder like I was a well-meaning cousin. "Maya, ideas are just one small piece. What investors remember is who's telling the story. Don't worry. When it all succeeds, your name will be in the product documentation." I wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe it was just a temporary oversight. So I said nothing. That was the first time I stayed silent, and my first mistake. The pattern repeated for months. I built the framework. He packaged it. I proposed new methods. He presented them to investors. When I raised concerns with HR, they said the same rehearsed line: "All work produced during company hours belongs to Lumatech. As for credit, that's an internal team matter." Bit by bit, I became the ghost behind every major breakthrough. Each time I saw a demo labeled under someone else's name, knowing I had written every line of its core code, I felt myself disappearing, slowly, painfully, from my own work. Still, I stayed. Still, I worked. I told myself that as long as the results spoke for themselves, recognition would come eventually. I was wrong again. 6 months before the award gala, I started a new project, a complete re-architecture of the old algorithm. It was faster, sharper, capable of predicting behavior in real time based on both expression and tone. I hadn't named it yet, but in my head, I called it neurolattice, a cognitive neural mesh. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't save it on the company's servers or send it through internal mail. I built it on my personal laptop during weekends at a corner cafe that knew me by name. I wasn't naive anymore, and I wasn't afraid of losing something I never truly had. About a week after I finished the first demo of Neurolattice, I got an invite to an after-work party at Slate and Pine, the bar Lumitech liked for its post-shift gatherings. I don't usually enjoy nights like that, but I went that evening, not to mingle, but to watch. Lumitech was changing. The company was swelling, fueled by millions from venture funds, and I could see the pattern. People like me, quiet engineers who lived inside solutions, were being pushed out of the center. That center now belonged to people like Eleanor Park. Eleanor was the perfect product of a calculated hiring play. She was the investor's niece, a name already mentioned in a Forbes Under 30 piece about shaping next-gen UX. To me, she was the one who asked the difference between convolutional and recurrent neural networks in week 2 of her internship. I sat at the bar, ordered a gin and tonic, and picked a seat tucked enough to avoid small talk, yet close enough to hear what mattered. About an hour later, Victor arrived with Eleanor. They either didn't see me or decided I wasn't worth the notice. They took a corner table a few yards away. The place was loud, indie rock turned just high enough to make everyone speak up. I have a skill that not many know about, a leftover from studying nonverbal behavior. I read lips. I sipped my drink, pretended to scroll, and watched. "Good work," Victor said, his smile half the familiar charm. "Your pitch to Redwood Capital blew them away. They called you a leader." Eleanor shrugged. "They think that framework is mine," she said. Victor let out a small laugh that had an edge. "As long as they invest, who you are does not matter." "Don't worry, Maya is not the type to speak up," he said. A chill ran through me. Eleanor hesitated. "I don't feel right about it. I only polish the interface. The core is Maya's. If this leaks..." Victor cut her off and leaned forward. "Listen to me," he said. "This is not about who did what. This is about who looks like they did it. You are young, bright, and well-connected. You were chosen. Maya is what everyone expects a good engineer to be. Skilled does not equal chosen." Silence followed. Then Victor raised his glass and clinked with Eleanor. "Welcome to the center of the game," he said. I do not remember how long I sat there after that. When I left the bar, my hands were shaking with anger. I was used to having my work taken. What cut deeper was the way they treated it as a legitimate tactic, cold and unapologetic. That was the moment everything cleared. There was no one behind me at that company. No rules mattered except whatever could be hidden or rationalized. If I wanted what was mine back, I could not play on their board. I had to make a new board. I went home and reopened the Neuro Lattice design. That night, I wrote nearly 2,000 lines of code. More important, I created a folder on my personal laptop and named it Rebuild. In that folder, I began to document everything, a timeline of ideas I had submitted internally and then watched disappear. Emails between Victor and me about technical solutions, never made public. My personal Git commits, where I had developed modules before pushing to the company repo, screenshots, memos, call logs. I did not do this for revenge. I did it for a simpler reason. If I wanted to rebuild everything, I needed the facts. And if one day someone asked me to prove authorship, I would have an answer, clear and detailed enough to be indisputable. Over the next week, I began reaching out to old colleagues, engineers who had left Lumitech because they were supposedly not a fit with company strategy. I met some at coffee meetups, called others. Their stories echoed mine. Hard work, valuable creations, then sidelined when the product succeeded. One of them, Dorian, used to lead the UI team. He told me Eleanor had asked him to rewrite a visual mapping routine that I had proposed in an internal doc. She asked for a demo to learn how it worked, then used that demo to present to the board 2 weeks later. Pieces fell into place, and when assembled, they revealed a pattern. Not just my story, a system. A selection mechanism that allowed only a certain type of person to take a seat at the table while the rest fueled their victories. Every system has weak points. Neurolattice, if developed the right way, would expose those cracks. I was not alone anymore, and they had no idea where I was rebuilding from. 3 weeks after that night at the bar, I sat in a quiet cafe in Soma, the kind of place where young startups meet before they can afford real offices. In front of me was an open laptop showing a pitch deck, a half-finished cold coffee, and a woman I never thought I'd have the chance to meet. Her name was Ingrid Rousseau, one of the founding partners of Vantix Capital, a venture firm known for spotting and funding breakthrough technologies before the rest of the world even noticed them. She was the one who'd invested in the company behind the machine learning model for market risk analysis, long before Goldman Sachs bought it for over $100 million. In other words, Ingrid could see the future hidden inside lines of code. I met her through Dorian. After leaving Lumitech, he'd once pitched a project to Vantix. It didn't go through, but he kept the connection. When I told him about Neurolattice, he asked, "Have you ever thought about starting your own company?" At the time, I hadn't. But sitting at that cafe table, I said for the first time, "Yes, I'm ready." Ingrid watched my presentation without blinking. I explained how Neurolattice wasn't just a behavioral AI. It was capable of adapting to emotion, creating an almost subconscious dialogue between humans and machines. More importantly, I showed her that it wasn't a single algorithm, but an entire ecosystem. I had rebuilt the data architecture, redesigned the APIs, and optimized the framework for large-scale integration. When I finished, Ingrid stayed silent for a long moment before nodding. "You didn't come here to ask for money," she said, her voice steady and sharp as a hammer striking wood. "You came to start a reversal. I like that." I kept my expression calm, though a pulse of adrenaline ran through me. I can't promise success, but I can promise I'll be the last one off the ship. Ingrid smiled. "Good. Keep that spirit, Maya, and never go back asking for a seat at a table where you weren't invited in the first place." We shook hands. The first deal was a seed investment of $2.8 million, enough to establish a company, hire a core team, and file a provisional patent for the initial version of Neurolattice. I named the company Synapt IQ. The name captured the essence of the technology, a network of synthetic synapses that think and adapt like real intelligence. After that meeting, everything moved like lined-up dominoes, ready to fall. I rented a small office on the top floor of a converted warehouse, a bright, quiet space where we could hold private meetings without echo. I chose my team carefully. Dorian took charge of UX. A former back-end engineer from Amazon handled infrastructure. 2 product specialists from rival companies, tired of politics and performance theater, joined soon after. Every person I brought in had once been pushed aside somewhere else. All of them carried talent, precision, and an unshakable resentment that could be turned into drive. We made no announcements, no website, no LinkedIn, no startup registry. We operated like a shadow company, developing in silence, invisible to the outside world. I still went to Lumitech every morning, sitting at my old desk as if nothing had changed. But inside me, 2 realities were running in parallel, one that was already dead and one that was just beginning to breathe. That Thursday afternoon, Victor held a team meeting to announce Eleanor's promotion to head of product experience. She gave a short speech about Lumitech's new vision while everyone smiled and clapped. I clapped too, but my eyes stayed on the slide behind her. One section described almost word for word the concept of emotional interaction I had outlined in my demo file over a year ago. They hadn't just stolen my work, they were redefining it, without me. The following week, I filed the patent for Neurolattice. I chose the submission date to match Lumitech's internal awards ceremony, the one I'd once hoped my team would win. This time, I didn't care who got the trophy. I had moved beyond the need for their validation. In parallel, I began reaching out to potential clients. Through old contacts, I connected with 3 mid-sized e-commerce companies that had once used Lumitech's services, but complained that the platform felt soulless. I gave them access to a Neurolattice demo. The results exceeded every expectation. In all 3 tests, conversion rates rose by more than 30% compared to the existing system. One client said, "We thought AI could only classify, Now it actually understands our customers. I didn't sign any contracts. It was still early, but I knew I had something Lumitech could never build, not just an algorithm, but belief. Belief that technology isn't only about selling more, it's about creating genuine connection between people and the world they move through, and I would never let them steal that again. A month after filing the patent for NeuroLattice, I received an email from Lumitech's HR department. Subject line: Staff allocation for annual event and nominations for the Technology Innovation Award. I knew that ceremony. It was always held at the Fremont Plaza Hotel, logos everywhere, cameras flashing, champagne speeches about vision and collaboration. The year before, I'd been on the short list for nomination, then removed at the last minute without explanation. This year, I expected nothing. The meeting took place on the 8th floor, more crowded than usual. Victor sat at the head of the table, glowing with confidence. Eleanor was smiling the way people do when they already know the outcome. I picked a seat near the end, quietly taking notes in my worn blue notebook, the same one I'd used to sketch ideas back when I still believed effort was enough. Victor began with his usual string of praise: user growth, integration efficiency, quarterly gains. Every achievement he mentioned tied back to the platform I'd helped build quietly in the background, though my name was nowhere in sight. Then came the announcement for the Technology Innovation Award. Eleanor Park, Victor said, his voice rich with pride, for her critical contribution to reshaping user experience through emotional interfaces and proactive behavior prediction. Applause filled the room. Eleanor gave a modest nod, the kind that looks humble enough to disarm envy. No one there thought she didn't deserve it. I stayed silent. I wasn't surprised. I wasn't even hurt. It felt like watching an old play with the same cast, except this time I was sitting in the audience instead of behind the curtain. And I knew the ending would be different. Victor wrapped up with logistics for the event. Each department could send only 3 representatives. Our technical team will be represented by Eleanor, Mark, and Ravi, he said, then turned toward me with a smile that was polite enough to sting. Maya, I know you've contributed a lot, but seats are limited. I hope you understand. I nodded. I understand. I'll stay at the office and work. For a few seconds, the room went still. No one spoke up, no one defended me. And in that silence, I finally understood. I never had a seat here, not at this event, not in their idea of who mattered. The ceremony took place Saturday night at Fremont Plaza, as always. I didn't go, but I made sure I was still present, in my own way. That afternoon, while everyone was getting their makeup done and steaming their suits, I sent an email. Recipients: the entire Lumitech executive board, including the CEO, legal department, HR, and several major investors. Subject: technical summary and patent ownership. Concerning behavioral platform, urgent. The attachments included the provisional patent documents for NeuroLattice filed under my name and Synapt IQ, a timeline proving I'd developed the algorithm independently, off company hours, without using corporate resources. A list of 7 potential clients who had signed NDAs with Synapt IQ, confirming interest in the product. A clear statement: any platform replicating or incorporating structures from NeuroLattice would face immediate legal action. Once the message was sent, I shut down my laptop, stood up, and walked out without looking back. That evening, I sat in a small Mexican diner on the edge of the city, ordered enchiladas, and reviewed the final design files. At 8:17 p.m., the moment Victor was likely stepping on stage to announce Eleanor's award, my phone started vibrating. The first message came from Lumitech's legal director. We need to talk. Then Victor. What did you just do? Then Eleanor. Maya, can we please talk? I didn't reply. I just looked at the screen, smiled faintly, and went back to eating. The next morning, I didn't go to Lumitech. Instead, I went to the Synaptic office, the one with my name etched in small letters on the glass door. The team was already there. Dorian placed a laptop on the table, showing an email from one of our potential clients. We're ready to move forward with the pilot contract under the agreed terms. I nodded. Sign it, it's time. We spent the entire day finalizing paperwork, sending out updates for the demo platform, and confirming legal coverage with our IP attorney. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like breathing with my own lungs for the first time. That afternoon, as sunlight poured through the small office windows, I realized something. I might not have stood on their stage, but I had built one of my own, and this time the seat at the center of the table belonged to me. 3 days after I sent that email during the award night, my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. The caller wasn't someone from legal, as I'd expected. It was someone far less likely. Vincent Hale, the senior executive director. He rarely dealt with the engineering floor, let alone came down to it. He said he wanted to meet in person to discuss the overall situation and clear up some misunderstandings. I agreed, but not at Lumitech's headquarters. Instead, I chose a neutral co-working space in the Mission District, somewhere I knew the security cameras ran constantly and the lease was under my company's name. No more gray zones, no more off-record deals. Vincent arrived on time. Gray suit, no tie, eyes sharp, but shadowed from sleepless nights. He still carried that controlled coldness, the kind that measured every move in terms of cost and benefit. "We don't want this to escalate," he began, his voice calm but clipped. "Your email has complicated things." I sat upright, making no effort to sound polite. Complicated is the softest word I've heard for being robbed of 3 years of work. He gave a small nod, acknowledging something without truly admitting fault. "I'm here to ask, are you really walking away, leaving everything you built at Lumitech?" "That's not what I built, Mr. Hale. What I built was taken, renamed, and handed to someone else. What I'm building now is intact and growing faster than ever." He studied me for a long moment. "Then what is it you want?" "Nothing," I said evenly. "No demands, no negotiations. I'm simply reclaiming what's mine, legally, intellectually, and ethically." He let out a thin, humorless laugh. "Then you should know, if you launch this product, we'll have to respond. The company has resources, legal power, and connections strong enough to crush a startup before it gets off the ground." I stayed calm. "I have lawyers too, and a patent, and our first client has already signed. But more than that, I have the truth." For a moment, silence settled between us. Then Vincent sighed, pulled a thin envelope from his briefcase, and slid it across the table. "This is an acquisition offer," he said. "We'd like to buy Neurolattice and Synapt IQ. You'd stay on as head of strategic development, reporting directly to me. Triple your current salary, plus equity." I didn't open the envelope. "And Eleanor stays?" "She'll move to the legacy product team. You'd lead behavioral tech entirely." I shook my head. "Too late, Mr. Hale. I'm not going back to a system where I have to prove my worth every day, while others only need to show up at the right place at the right time." He leaned back, thoughtful. "You think you'll keep clients once they realize your startup lacks scale, funding for the next round, or credit assurance?" "They don't need assurances," I said. "They need results, and they've already seen my platform increase conversions by over 30% in 2 weeks, something Lumitech hasn't managed in 6 straight quarters." Vincent didn't argue. For the first time, he just sat there, silent. Maybe he realized the negotiation was already over. As I stood to leave, I said one last thing. "Next time you look for someone to lead innovation, choose the person who actually creates it, not the one who says the right things in a meeting." I walked out, closing the door behind me, feeling lighter than I had in years. For the first time, turning something down felt like progress. That night, while our team met to discuss hiring additional engineers and improving the machine learning module, Dorian got a message from a friend in Lumitech's marketing department. Eleanor had resigned. No announcement, no spectacle, just a sterile internal notice. I didn't feel triumphant or bitter. She'd been part of the same machine, smart, ambitious, but caught in a game she didn't invent. The next day, a video call came through from Ingrid Rousseau. She congratulated me for refusing the buyout and informed me that a new investment group, Ellison Ventures, wanted to join our pre-Series A round. That meant 6 more months of runway for Synapt IQ. enough to expand the platform, build a customer success team, and begin our push into the European market. Remember when I asked why you dared to leave a big company? Ingrid said with a knowing smile. Now I understand. You didn't leave. You leveled up. I smiled back because she was right. I hadn't left a company. I'd left a system that no longer deserved to keep me. And now I didn't need them anymore. They couldn't say the same. 2 months after my meeting with Vincent, SynaptIQ officially signed long-term contracts with 3 major clients in e-commerce and finance, companies that had once been with Lumitech. The news wasn't public, but inside the tech world, word traveled fast. People understood what it meant. A new wave was coming. We moved out of our small Mission District office into a larger space near South Park, an address that had once been the starting ground for several Silicon Valley legends. Dorian joked that location has its own kind of startup feng shui, and for the first time, I felt it too. The place didn't feel like a temporary hideout anymore. It felt like a real company. I started hiring, carefully, not by the length of a resume or the prestige of past employers, but by one thing: the look in someone's eyes. That spark of a person who'd been overlooked but never stopped creating. Meredith, an operations specialist once denied promotion at Lumitech for lacking leadership traits, now led all client integration projects. Ravi, a former software engineer who left Lumitech after his product was outsourced to a cheaper overseas team, became head of SynaptIQ's core systems group. Each of them carried a story, a fragment of everything the old system had wasted. Work wasn't easy. Some nights I slept at the office. One week, a critical data bug nearly crashed our demo. The client threatened to cancel the trial. We fixed it in 48 hours, sent a patch and a full technical breakdown. Not only did they stay, they asked to expand the partnership to 2 new modules. Dorian came to me holding a printed client email. "You realize," he said, "if this had happened at Lumitech, they would have dumped the blame on the whole team. Here, it became part of our learning curve." I nodded. That was exactly what I wanted to build, a company that wasn't afraid of mistakes, only of refusing to correct them. By month 3, we held a private demo for a small group of potential investors. No flashy stage, no glossy brochures, just a whiteboard, handwritten flow maps, and a live prototype. After the demo, one investor, Karen Dubois, a former IBM engineer, looked at me and said, "There's no shortage of behavioral AI startups, but people like you, who understand both the system and the human side, are rare." 3 days later, SynaptIQ received pre-Series A offers, totaling $6 million from 3 different funds. We chose Karen's, and right when I thought the storm had passed, Lumitech made its move. On a Monday morning, while we were discussing our expansion into Canada, I got an email from legal. Lumitech had filed an intellectual property infringement notice. They claimed SynaptIQ was using algorithmic structures substantially similar to those developed at Lumitech and demanded we shut down Neural Lattice within 10 days or face legal action. I wasn't shocked. I'd expected it for months. Still, it felt like someone trying to break the wings I'd just learned to use. We held an emergency meeting with our lawyers, engineering leads, and investor representatives. After 2 hours of dissecting every line of the claim, our attorney stood up and said firmly, "You have nothing to worry about. Legally, you've done everything right." Still, I stayed cautious. I drafted a formal response attaching full documentation, development logs, device history, patent records, and, most ironically, a copy of an old internal email from Lumitech's own legal advisor, who had once dismissed my proposal as lacking commercial potential. 3 days later, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. The caller ID read, "Preston Wade, Chairman, Lumitech Board." A man who rarely appeared in public, let alone reached out directly. "Ms. Levinson," he said, his voice calm and low, "I'd like to talk." For a second, I didn't speak. This wasn't middle management anymore. This was the man at the very top. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "We underestimated you," he continued, "and perhaps our entire system did. You did something few people ever dare to do, Walk away from the table and build your own. I said nothing. I waited. Then he added quietly, "You may not need us anymore, but the company is on the edge." There was something different in his tone now. No threat, no strategy, just acknowledgement, maybe even respect. And in that moment, I understood. They were no longer attacking. They were trying to negotiate, but this wasn't their board anymore. Not this time, not ever again. I met Preston Wade a week after that call in a discreet office on the 42nd floor of a downtown financial tower. No company logos, no assistants, just him and me, sitting across from each other in a gray carpeted room lit by soft lamps, with an abstract painting behind him, layers of overlapping color, as tangled as the story between us. Many layers, many sides, nothing simple. "I'm not here to threaten you or to rescue anyone," he began, his voice steady, the tone of a man who'd survived too many boardroom wars to need theatrics. "I asked you here because if you keep going the way you're going, Lumatech won't be able to compete within 6 months. You know that." I didn't deny it. Synapt IQ's latest build of Neurolattice was already running pilot programs in 3 countries. Our platform wasn't just faster, it was learning faster, thanks to the reinforcement learning module Ravi had developed and the adaptive feedback system Meredith had designed. Lumatech, weighed down by layers of management and constant turnover, couldn't catch up if they tried. "You can maintain your pace," Preston went on, "but to scale globally, you'll need more than funding. You'll need legal infrastructure, international compliance, deployment networks, things that, whether anyone likes it or not, are still in our hands." I studied him. This was a negotiation, but not like Vincent's. No condescension, no attempt to dominate. He spoke like a man addressing an equal, an opponent, not a subordinate. "And what do you want in return?" I asked. "Nothing major," he said, a faint smile at the corner of his mouth. "We'd like to acquire 35% of Synapt IQ. No operational interference, no rebranding, just a strategic stake." I sat silent for a few seconds. On paper, it was tempting. 35% at our current valuation meant enough capital to open 2 international offices, double our staff, and accelerate rollout for the next 6 months. But I knew better. Money is never just money. It always comes with strings, some written, some invisible. "I need time," I said. Preston nodded. "I won't push. You've already won a major round, Maya. I just hope you're thinking about the long game." When I stepped out of the building, a light rain had started. Each drop against my shoulder felt like a reminder. In this world, every victory has a cost. That evening, I met with the leadership team and told them everything. Every word, no embellishment. Dorian spoke first. "This is what they do. When they can't outrun you, they buy you." Ravi tapped his fingers against the table. "But without new capital, our growth speed will cap out. Competitors are already watching us." Meredith stayed quiet for a while, then looked straight at me. "The real question is, what do we want to become? A startup that flashes and fades, or a company that endures because it kept its core intact?" Didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't know, but because I wanted all of us to answer that together. 3 days later, I returned to the 42nd floor. Preston was standing by the window, looking down at Wall Street like a general surveying a battlefield. "I'm not here to sign," I said. "I'm here to thank you." He turned, one eyebrow slightly raised, as if he'd seen it coming. "I thought about it carefully," I said, "and I realized what I'm building isn't just technology. It's a new way of working, a model where every voice matters, where people aren't buried under titles and politics." I placed a document on the table, the new Synapt IQ charter we'd rewritten over the past 3 days. "We're opening a Series A round, strategic investors only, but with limits. No one can own more than 15%, and no one gets a board seat." Preston smiled faintly. "You're smart. Most people come here asking for money. Very few come here to protect their power." "I didn't come to ask," I said. "I came to make it clear. This world doesn't have just one table. And those of us who were once pushed away are building a new one." You're welcome to sit with us, not to lead, but to listen. He was silent for a few seconds, then extended his hand. I won't invest, at least not yet, but I'll be watching you, closely. When I left the office, a strange calm filled me, not because I'd turned down a lucrative deal, but because I hadn't traded myself to get it. A week later, Synaptic announced its Series A raise under the new charter. Within 3 days, we received more than 20 investment offers, including from 3 funds that had once rejected me back at Lumitech. We chose 2 partners, not because they offered the most money, but because they understood what we were building. We weren't looking for an exit, we were opening a path. And the same people who once shut us out were now standing outside, watching, waiting to see if this new table could stand. But I already knew. It wasn't just standing, it was growing. Every single day, because it was built by the very people they once called the extras. A year after the night I was told to wait outside the door, I stood on stage as the keynote speaker at the largest behavioral technology conference in the country, held in Seattle. I didn't wear a suit. I chose a dark green sweater, the same shade as the walls at SynaptIQ's office, because I wanted to represent what we'd built, not what I'd walked away from. From the stage, I looked out at hundreds of faces, investors, researchers, industry leaders, and among them, a few people I used to work with, including Eleanor. She was sitting in the 3rd row. She looked different now. The arrogance in her eyes had softened into something else, something that looked a lot like growth. I began my talk with a familiar line, this time with a quiet smile. "You can wait outside." A murmur rippled through the audience. I let it settle before I continued. That was what someone once told me a year ago, when I stood outside a room where I thought I'd finally be recognized. But instead of waiting, I opened another door. And today, I'm not here to talk about revenge. I'm here to talk about building. I told my story, not to embellish, not to accuse. I never mentioned Lumitech by name, never said Eleanor or Vincent. Because I'd learned that when you tell a story truthfully, people will recognize themselves in it, and they'll know exactly where they stand. I spoke about how we'd redesigned more than a platform. We'd redesigned a way of working, a company where every member owned a piece of what they built, where mistakes weren't punished, they were studied, where ideas didn't have to fight each other to survive. When I ended with the words, "The most powerful seat isn't the one someone gives you, it's the one you build with the people who believe in you," the room rose to its feet. 3 days later, I received an email from Eleanor. No excuses, no long explanations, just one sentence. "I was wrong. I don't know where it all began, but I know I stood on the wrong side. If you ever need help, even just someone to listen, I'm here." I didn't reply right away. I saved the message, not as a reminder of victory, but as proof that people can change if they're brave enough to admit they were wrong. That same week, Synaptic closed a partnership with a European firm, our first step toward expansion in Berlin. We now had over 50 full-time employees from 8 different countries, speaking 12 different languages, all sharing one: trust. I still arrived at the office first every morning. I walked the floor, checked in with the engineers, listened to the UX team's new ideas, and sometimes just made coffee with Dorian. We weren't the ones who left the old game anymore. We'd become the ones designing the new one. One quiet Saturday evening, I stood on our rooftop terrace overlooking the city. Across the river, I could see Lumitech's building. The lights were still on, still busy, but I felt no bitterness, no anger, just a nod to the past that taught me sometimes you have to leave to truly grow. I remembered the night I'd walked away from that award ceremony. The echo of that sent email still heavy in my chest. Back then, I had no idea what would come next. I only knew that if I didn't act, I'd stay the same, forever waiting outside. And now, I want to say this, not just for me, but for anyone listening. If you've ever been pushed away from the table, told you're not ready, not connected, not enough, remember this: you don't need their invitation. Build your own table, and one day, the same people who turned you away will ask for a seat. Just believe that what you're building matters. and keep building. We started with an email. Now we're rewriting the entire framework. And that table, the one I once dreamed of sitting at, is right here in this office. Not reserved for me, but for everyone who was ever told, you can wait outside.